Hey booktubers! So this past week I read quite the variety of books. I managed to read 3.5 books, and I threw the half in there because I read 2 graphic novels, which put together doesn't even amount to a novella, so there you go. Okay, so I might as well start with the graphic novels. So the 2 that I read, the first one was the new series of 30 Days of Night, Volume 1, and then the second was H.P. Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror. So each graphic novel was supposed to have 44 pages, but the main story took up less than half of that, so you're talking like 20 pages for each story, which sort of pissed me off. Granted, I don't read that many graphic novels, so I don't know if this happens all the time. I mean, I read the whole Crow series, and I don't remember that ever happened with them, but whatever. I know it's going to be like a series and whatever, but still, it's kind of a jip to only get 20 pages. You can't really get a feel for a story in 20 pages, even with a graphic novel. So I wasn't very impressed. Of the 2, I liked 30 Days of Night a little bit more. Dunwich Horror I really did not like. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about them. Okay, so another book I read this week was The White Queen by Philippa Gregory, and this is the first book in her Cousins' War series, also known as The War of the Roses, also known as The Battle of the Yorks and the Lancastrians. And this book is about a woman by the name of Elizabeth Woodville, who in the 1400s caused a huge scandal by being a widowed mother of 2 boys who ended up marrying the very young, newly crowned King Edward. And the very first scene, actually, is when they first met. And at least according to this book, and in her author's note, she does say that this particular sequence is factual. Elizabeth is waiting, standing under a tree by the road as the king is going by, hoping to flag him down and get him to help her with reinstating her inheritance, because when her husband died, she was stripped of everything and ended up having to move back in with her parents. And they end up falling in love and getting married, and a whole bunch of soap opera-esque drama ensues. And the main theme of the story is the battle between Edward and his brothers over who is the rightful king of England. And plus all of the behind-the-scenes shenanigans going on with Elizabeth and her family and his family, and yeah. So I'm a very big fan of Philippa Gregory's writing. I've read several of her books in the past. I love the whole time period. I love anything to do with ancient British royalty, that kind of thing. However, I was very much overwhelmed by the amount of information I was having to take in with this book. There were a lot of people, a lot of characters. But the biggest problem, and I know that this isn't, this is something that's common considering the time period, but there were so many people in this book who had the same name. Okay, there were like several Georges, a bunch of Edwards, several Richards, a couple of Elizabeth, a couple Margarets. It was really hard for me to keep track of which one she was talking about at a given time. So that was really frustrating. There's one particular scene that sticks with me, is that she's coming out of confinement after having yet another one of his like 30 children. This woman, I swear to God, it seemed like she was pregnant every other chapter. Yeah, so she's coming out of confinement, and the first thing she finds out is that while she was away having another baby, the king had set up his latest mistress in a house like practically next door to the castle, and that at all the functions, the royal functions, he was there with the mistress, and when she confronts him about it, he pretty much laughs at her and doesn't understand why she would be upset. Yeah. So they were both pretty messed up. Of course, it's probably like everyday behavior for that time period, but whatever. Anyway, so I mean, I enjoyed the story. It was a good story. I am planning on reading the second book in the series, but yeah, it was a little overwhelming. So yeah. Okay, so another book I read was, it was called Lust, It was by Charlotte Featherstone, and it was the first book in her Sins and Virtues series. And pretty much it's a fairy tale. It's set like in the fairy realm, and you guys know I'm not big on fairy stories, but yeah, so the whole concept of this book is that the dark fairy are cursed with the sons having the 7 sins, and in order to break the curse they need to find and fall in love with the women who epitomize these virtues. And as cheesy as it sounds, I actually quite enjoyed this book. I'm a big fan of Charlotte Featherstone. I like her books. I do read romance. I much prefer historical romance as my sort of guilty pleasure. And she doesn't write the typical historical romance. These are very different. I can't exactly pinpoint exactly how they're different, but they are. They're very smart. Yeah. And despite the cringeworthy title and the cover, which is also cringeworthy, it was actually a really good story. So I'm only like this much embarrassed to admit that I read it, but I did, and it ended up being actually the book that I enjoyed the most this past week. So what does it say about me? But at least I'm admitting it. I didn't have to tell you I read it. I could have overlooked it. But no, I'm honest with you people, because that's just the kind of girl that I am. Okay, and moving on. The last book that I read this past week, The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. Yeah, I had such a problem with this book, and I hate that I can't sit here and like go crazy over this book and say how amazing it was. I would love nothing more than to sit and say this book was brilliant. I didn't hate it. I didn't. I just had a big problem with it. I would say for the first 50 pages or so, I had no clue as to what was going on. It felt at the beginning, especially, that I was dropped into the middle of a story, and I don't like that at all. It was very disorienting. It took me a long time to get a hold of exactly what was going on. You know, but pretty much going into it, the only thing I knew was that it was set on an island, and once a year these wild horses come running out of the ocean, and there's a race. And yeah, and these horses are not like, normal horses. These are like man-eating, deadly, incredibly dangerous, vicious horses. And of course, what is the logical thing to do with a beast like that? Try and capture them and ride them in a race on the beach. And try not to die. Yeah. Yeah, she's one of my favorite authors. And, I think it's a little silly to expect that I'm going to love everything that they write, but still, I wanted to love this book, and I didn't, and it's very sad. Yeah. Okay, so that's what I read this week, and as for what I'm reading coming up, I just started Partials by Dan Wells, which just came out today. Today's Tuesday, yeah. It just came out today, and I love it so far. I'm only 10% in, but I love it. That's a dystopian, by the way. And after that, I'm probably going to read Rain Shadow Road. I think that's what it's called, by Lisa Kleypas. She's another one of my favorite authors. And it's another contemporary romance. I don't like contemporary romance, but I read the first book in that series, the Friday Harbor series, and I liked it, so I'm hopeful. That's pretty much it for me this week. And I'm sorry if I seem a little scatterbrained, but then what else is new? But I just worked all day. I'm working 6 days this week, and I'm always frazzled when that happens, so yeah. 3 weeks from today, people, I will be in California. Not that I need a vacation or anything, but yeah. Okay, so I will talk to you guys later, and happy reading, guys.